Give them a minute, our ROTC kids to come back in. It's always suspenseful to see if they will come back in or not.
Do they know they're supposed to come
I don't know. Lexi, you want to see if they're,
And Mr. Alvarez is over there. I think he usually tells them.
there they go. We always appreciate you guys coming in and doing that for us. If you could, please introduce yourselves, what you like best about ROTC.
I'm Cadet Major Alexa Hamilton. I really like the family aspect and getting to serve our community a lot of times, so.
I am Elijah Workman, and one of the things that I love most about the Corps is the camaraderie and the family that you get to meet.
I'm Cadet First Lieutenant Matthew Butler. One of the things I like about the Corps is all of the people that are able to get together because of the Corps. It really gives a massive family aspect.
I'm Cadet Zoe Workman, and I like all the family and friends that we make in ROTC.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Any questions for our group today?
Yeah, appreciate him being here.
Yes, thank you very much. We will see you next time. Hey, Mrs. Irvin, roll call, phone call. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lane,
Here.
Mrs. Cope,
Here.
Mrs. Dalton,
Here.
Mrs. Larson,
Here.
Mr. McCutcheon.
Here.
Item number 4, adoption of the agenda. Can I please have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Cope,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon,
Yes.
Mrs. Larson,
Yes.
Mr. Lane.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item number 5, communications reports. I don't believe we had any public sign up today.
Unless Mrs. Jeanette would like to speak. Okay.
Moving
Not
on.
today. Moving on.
B, student board member update, Alexa Lane.
Should have just put it up on screen.
Controls the screens.
All right, so it's great to be back. This past week was homecoming. We had our dance on Saturday. So starting out the week, we had a spirit week, so we had different dress-up days that all the students got the chance to participate in. Thursday was the homecoming parade, and the floats were phenomenal, from Pee Wee football to high school football and everything in between. So on the far left, you can see the senior and freshman student council float, which is a boot for Boot the Tigers, since we played Loveland at the football game. And then on the right, you see the junior and sophomore floats, which is a cage for Cage the Tigers. They're both in the Western theme. And then if you see the little photos at the bottom, those are actually wanted posters of Loveland football players, which I thought was pretty creative. Next, following right after the parade, we had our Powder Puff game, which was super fun. I had the opportunity to play in it. Although seniors did lose, but both teams put up a good fight. Juniors ultimately took the win of a 20-13.
There was some creative clock management there at the end, Alexa. I mean, 6 seconds magically got put back on the clock. I'm not sure how that happened, but I think that's you playing quarterback right there, isn't it?
Yeah.
It was good. It was a great turnout. We had a big crowd.
Then on Friday, we had our pep rally again following the Western theme. As you can see, we did have a mechanical bull, so it was super fun getting to see students, and Mr. Taylor, the history teacher, as well hopped on there. So it was super entertaining and a great last hurrah, since this was our last homecoming pep rally for the seniors. And then homecoming again, it was the Wild Warrior West, so super cool. We had a big cactus, as you can see, in the middle of the dance floor. It's probably about 10 feet tall, so it was pretty cool to see that. And then outside of the homecoming events that happened this week, on Monday, September 11th, the volleyball team recognized all first responders in the audience. It's super nice and special to see that the sports teams are recognizing all first responders for everything they do and continue to do for our community and our nation. Warrior Pride, I'm sure you've seen this post on Facebook or the school website, but Lebanon High School was ranked in the national top 40% of all high schools. So to be in the top 50% and top 40% really shows the hard work of the teachers and students is paying off and being recognized. And then the high school's very own Jessica Howdeshell, who is a gym teacher, health teacher, and Hope Squad facilitator, was recognized at the Reds game on September 10th for being the Lebanon High School 988 ambassador. 988 is the suicide prevention and mental health awareness hotline. So if there's anything going on that you feel like you need to talk to somebody about it, 988 is a great resource to do so. So it was awesome to see that our school was recognized at the Reds game. And then something on our state report card came out late last week, and so I met with Mr. Reynolds to hear some updates from his side, which is something I'm going to start doing this year. The week before every meeting, I'm going to meet with him to see what he has, just so I can ensure that you guys are getting the most amount of updates I can provide. So the 2023 school year, Lebanon High School had the highest index and highest index percentage in school history, and the 4-year graduation rate was at 97%. In other words, that means that 97% of the graduating class last year completed their high school graduation in 4-year time frame. And then for upcoming events, there is the football game on Friday. The Air National Guard will be presenting some information, so it will be starting a little bit earlier at 6 p.m. And then this weekend on Saturday, the marching band is hosting their invitational, which starts at 11 a.m.
Thank you. C, Superintendent Report, Mr. Severs.
Let me see if I can do this from here. Okay, so I'll give me a second to pull this up here. Cancel out of it. There's the state budget, there's the superintendent. So I apologize in advance. This will be a little bit longer than normal, which is saying something. Because there were several things on here I felt like we needed to cover. One of the things I want to try to do is get in a regular habit of talking about enrollment, looking at what are we doing, how are we progressing in terms of our student enrollment. We typically go up as the year goes on, but the best comparison I have, this is a chart. You guys may remember last June we looked at it. So what does it look like comparison to our August and starting? Are we up or are we down? Typically throughout the year, our enrollment increases. So we'll get a few more kindergarten kids now that they realize school started and they should have signed up, right? Things like that. So just to kind of keep track of and follow along, right now, as of today's numbers, 5,422 students enrolled. That's slightly down from where we were at the end of last school year. Remember, we kept the fiscal year 19 in here before. That was sort of the high water mark. That was the highest we've been as a district. So something to just point out, right? I mean, if we look at sort of along the diagonal, we're not necessarily losing students. We just have a few smaller ones in spots. So like along the yellow here, this is the same group of students longitudinally here. So 415 2 years ago is now 433. 416, 424, 442. But we lost, the big difference is down here at the beginning. We have a smaller kindergarten class. We have some classes in here that, just overall numbers look slightly smaller. So Our high school, right now, this is one of the largest freshman classes we've ever had at Lebanon High School, at least in the last, I think 10, 15 years. It's been 469 is a lot. Typically, we see kids leave Lebanon at the end of 8th grade. We see a decline sometimes in terms of that transition. We don't normally see an increase of 16 because we have kids that will go to private schools or things after they've gone to with us through school. So that's a change for us this year. It's an increase, and slightly less as we go through. So this is a piece of data that we were asked at a superintendent meeting recently, was what's the impact we're seeing, if anything, for the changes in vouchers this summer. Vouchers passed state law. So I went back and looked, comparison this year from actually last school year, from June 1st to the end of August was kind of the time frame we polled last summer and through school starting. We lost 37 students, 27 of which happened in the summer months, June and July. But for comparison's sake, the previous summer, we lost 47 students. And so I don't know that that's a big impact. We'll continue to monitor on our student enrollment. This is hard to see. I'm sorry. It's just straight out of a data center that we have. But I kind of wanted to point out, I'm going to stand up so I can read it. The upper left-hand corner, the upper left-hand corner, this shows 4,787 students. That's our resident students. We do have some open enrollment kids, and by open enrollment, we're talking about somebody who's following their parent from another school district. So if their parent works for us, but they live in Franklin School District, for example, they can come here. And 111 other non-open enrollment, actually that would probably be the non-open enrollment situation there. So that's where our students come from. The school choice options, what do we have in terms of numbers of kids taking last year school choice? 96 were going to Ed Choice expansion students, so that's as they began to expand who qualified for a voucher. They had 96 students that chose that last year. 42 students, which I'm not exactly sure how they qualified for the Cleveland Schools Ed Choice voucher, but what I can tell you is there are different voucher systems in place. One is if your school is low performing. So we had a school that was considered low performing for several years, and once those kids became eligible and they took it, then they stayed. And so if they qualified when they were at Donovan, which was one of our schools, the only school we had that was considered low performing consistently for several years, they could go that way. And then we have 49 students who were taking the autism or the John Peterson scholarship and choosing to go elsewhere with it. And then down here in the corner, what types of schools are they going to? So an online community school, so students going to Greater Ohio Virtual School or Ohio K-12 or TRECA, something like that. Majority of our students that are choosing to access these options right now are choosing to access them based off of online community schools. Actually, 49 students in the dropout prevention, that's actually GOVs. They're considered a dropout prevention and recovery program based here in Warren County. And then 20 going to a site-based community school. This does not include, because up until this point in time, it wasn't including if a student used their voucher to go to a private school. They have to be a chartered school in order for this to count. So some are chartered, some aren't. Okay, the next portion of what I was supposed to talk about here is the report card. So if you look at, this is sort of the 5 categories of the Ohio State report card that we have. Overall, 3.5 stars. We've talked about this a little bit, sent some updates on what that looks like for us. How did we get there? Last year, I believe we were a 3.5 star district as well. And so we're similar to where we were before. Achievement is based off of performance index, which we'll talk about here in a second. We were 4 stars. Graduation rate, which Alexa commented on earlier, our graduation rate was like slightly below 97%, 4 stars. Had we had one more graduate, either at a 4-year or a 5-year graduate, we would have been 5 stars. And one student, we would have been 5 stars, which then would have made our overall average 4 stars, and it would have changed, it changes things. So gap closing, It talks about chronic absenteeism. We'll look at some more details of this in a second. Gap closing is an area where last year we were 5 stars. This year we were 4. Gap closing is looking at a student who qualifies as either economically disadvantaged, English language learner, gifted, minority students, and how are we at doing it, closing the achievement gap in those subgroups. Early literacy, it's 3 stars. It's actually up from 2 stars the year before. And there's some, I think, real reasons where we should expect that to be, and I'll point that out in a second, where we should expect that to be higher. And I think we've structurally made some changes, instructionally have made some changes, and I expect that to continue to go up. Progress is 2 stars. If anybody in the room can figure out how to evaluate and decide value-added scores and progress, I would appreciate that, but we'll take a look at it here in a second. And then next year coming will be college, career, workforce, and military readiness. And so those are, that's a score we don't have yet. I'm gonna go through this, and I'm not trying to I don't want to spend a bunch of time, but please stop me and ask me a question if you have it. Achievement and Performance Index. This is a 4-star area for us. It's not necessarily did they pass the test? That's a portion of it, right? Did they get proficient and pass the test? But how well? Performance Index measures, did you just pass the test? Do you get more points if you're accomplished or accelerated or advanced beyond just being proficient? This is an increase for us. This is a better Performance Index score than what we had last year. It's actually, this 91.13 is an increase. It's based out of a total of 108.79, which was kind of a state change for that. It's a 4-star rating. How do we increase achievement and performance index? Just some thoughts on what we may do here and some things that we're working on and discussing. If you look at here on the right-hand side, this is based on how we performed on the test. The dark green is Advanced Plus. The only way to get Advanced Plus is the child has to score advanced on the test and be accelerated. So they're a 3rd grader taking 4th grade math. They take the 4th grade math test and they score advanced, then they qualify for Advanced Plus. We have some gifted students. We've not typically accelerated a whole lot of students in the past unless their parents have requested for their child to be accelerated. But when they do that, then that child needs to be performing at the advanced level in order to get that Advanced Plus. We need to make sure that we're stretching and helping those gifted students perform well on those tests or those that are accelerated. It's how well they perform on the test. So if you look at the dark green, it's very small percentage. Advanced is this percentage. That's a pretty good chunk. 23.3% of our kids that took a test, any test, scored advanced. That's the highest score you can get unless you're accelerated. That's pretty good. Accomplished, second highest score you can get. So we've got 45%, right? And this accomplished and advanced, which is one of the reasons why we were doing fairly well when it comes to this ranking. We need to get more of these blue students, limited and basic, up into the proficient. We need to get proficient students up into accomplished. We need to cut accomplished up into advanced. How do you do that? We need to look at where those students are in those analysis. We need to look at the MTSS and sort of how do we intervene and support the students down at limited and basic that are off track behind and get them up to at least proficient. And it's really fully implementing and staffing and getting people to understand this sort of MTSS mindset of it's not just for the kids that need an intervention. MTSS also looks at how can we stretch and enhance and enrich students who need stretched on the top end. One of the things we've talked about is an emphasis on item analysis, looking at the test with teachers and saying your kids didn't do well or your kids did well on this item. We've got some areas as we look at those things, we're like, hey, listen, we could focus some attention on this. And so how do we dig into that? That's one of the works our coaches and curriculum department's going to do. It's a 4 stars, it's already pretty decent. This just shows a little bit of the increases and the decreases. These are the areas which last year we improved. There are 13 tests that we are required to administer. And then if you look at those, We increased on 13 and we decreased on 7 of those tests. The net gain, was 43.6% on those. So these are some of the jumps that we had. If you're looking at this and you're a math teacher like myself or Mr. Lane, you're figuring out why is our 7th grade math scores really low and what can we do to improve that? Well, part of that reason is how we structured our junior high math program. We put 7th grade students who can achieve, and they're taking 8th grade or hybrid math. And so we have a lot of students accelerated taking Algebra 1 and going on to their hybrid or accelerated math. So those 7th grade students, we actually have a very small percentage of kids actually taking 7th grade math, right? So when you go to the high school and you look at the high school algebra exam, the people taking algebra at the high school are the same kids that were taking 7th and 8th grade math at the junior high. And so it's typically the same group of kids. We do it, and it provides us a benefit in terms of accelerating students, but it also provides this type of score because we've taken our best kids out of that 7th grade math score. So those are some of the increases in the achievements. A graduation rate, 96.2 for 4 years, 96.7 for 5-year graduation. It's a 4-star rating. We're 1 graduate short, like I said before. What are some things we're doing to make sure? I mean, if you look at this, we're the blue line. We've actually bounced back up a little bit from where we were last year on a slight dip. The green is our similar districts. They took a bigger dip this year in terms of graduation rate. We actually improved. We're well above the state average on graduation rate. We're getting kids across the finish line. What can we do? We're trying to figure out ways to partner, and we have a new partner that we're working with, the Graduation Alliance. It's an online program that allows non-graduates and dropout students or students close to being dropouts an option of finishing, and they can actually get a Lebanon diploma. We think that would help some kids get across the finish line. And they use online curriculum, but they have teachers and they have coaches and they have supports that are all provided through Graduation Alliance at a fraction of the cost of sending kids to the alternative school. And for a student who wants to get a Lebanon diploma instead of a GOVS diploma or a TRECA diploma or something else online, this is a way for them to do that. We think that could be something we're starting this year. And they will also reach out to all of these kids that last year didn't graduate or the previous year and didn't graduate. And they'll say, hey, we have a way for you to get a high school diploma. You're only a couple credits short. What do you think? And hopefully we can see some rebound on that number even next year and get it back to a 5. Gap closing, once again, I talked about it. It's graduation rate, it's English language learners progress, it's chronic absenteeism, which we were fine on. It's a little bit higher than we want to be, but it's better than the state average and our comparable averages. ELA achievement, math achievement. So you look at all the subgroups. These are the examples of subgroups. This is just one report. We had 33 Asian or Pacific Islander kids that took this test. Their performance index was a 92.727. Their expected, based on state goal, based on our previous numbers, was a 87.58. So we got it in that category. We received all of the points for gap closing, and it would have been a 5, except for the fact that our progress score hurts us in gap closing. It brought us down a star. So we thought we were going to have a 5 in gap closing until our progress score came out. Part of the calculation is if you don't meet your progress score, they drop you down a star in gap closing. But we're meeting the needs. We're closing the gaps on these students in these subgroups. Gifted students, we talked about this a little bit ago. Our gifted student performance index is pretty high. If you go back and look at what it was for our non-gifted kids, we were like 83.9% of the max. This is at 96% of the max. They continue to perform at high levels in our gifted program. What we need to try to figure out is how can we grow this green box? If they're gifted, how can we get some of them to be advanced plus? Mr. Grayler and I are talking about that are there ways to code that on high school students who are taking AP or accelerated or honors? Do those consider accelerated classes, or is it just being served? So we've got some back-end homework to do there. This is the chart, and I'll be honest with you, this is our lowest score, and we have 0 data on it, besides the fact that we got 2 points, 2 stars. We don't get the report until October. We have no way of knowing what our value-added data is besides 2 stars. And so I have nothing to share with you. just as a way of understanding value added, it's a statistical analysis. It's a proprietary document. Those of you who've been on the board for a while, Mark Rayler said, I actually came to a board meeting one time, talked about value added, showed them the formulas that are used to calculate value added, and said, I can't figure it out, and I've read the entire document. It's like calculus stuff. They take how you've done previously, and they put you into a cohort group that predicts what they think you should do in the future. So for example, 5th grade science is the first science test they take in end of course assessment. There's a prediction score for every kid in 5th grade, what they think they should get on the 5th grade science test based on how they did in 4th grade math, 3rd grade reading, and 4th grade reading. Nothing to do with science. But they have a prediction score based on how they think people have done in the past. And if you don't meet that target, you don't meet value added or growth. So we have work to do. I mean, I'm not, there's no way to sugarcoat it, right? Value added's 2 stars. We're going to dig in, but we don't have any data to show right now to even look at where our biggest areas of needs are.
Once we get the report in October, is there any way that we can question it or?
I mean, if we think there's data incorrections, then there is an appeals process. So, we'll take a look at it when we get it, and then we'll sit down with teachers, and basically they're gonna get their teacher value-added reports, which is showing how much growth they got for their kids based off what they expected. So principals will have those discussions on the teacher value-added side of it, and we'll try to identify where we did or did not do well based off of this evaluation. So, it is what it is at this point in time. I can't tell you any more than that. Early literacy component's broken down into 3 different things. How well did the kids do in the 3rd grade proficiency, the end of course assessment, or the state test in 3rd grade? How are we doing at improving literacy? We use the Ames Web reading diagnostic, which I'll show you if you guys remember the red, green, and yellow triangles from last year. So it's a one test given on one day. And so, for example, if you were on that day at the beginning of kindergarten off track, then in the next year at the beginning of 1st grade, they take the 1st grade test and they see, are you off track or on track? It's either a yes or a no. Students that were off track, we get credit for moving them to on track. Students who were on track last year and now are not on track the following year, we lose points for. So if you look at like this is last year's data. In kindergarten, we had 21 students not on track that in the fall, and we moved 4 of them to on track. We had 79 students not on track in 1st grade. To 2nd grade, we moved 41 on track. And the last thing is the promotion to 4th grade is a component. The state law changed. We can't hold anybody back from 3rd grade because of their reading scores, right? There's ways to get around it. We have 100% of our students that promoted to 4th grade, so it helps that average. Here's one of the things that I want to talk about for a second is when we get a state report card, it's one test on one day, right? And I think there's some confusion, and I've talked to some of you in the past. I think there was previous superintendent sent out a letter like, this doesn't define the work we do, but what it came across as is we don't care about the state report card, right? I think it's important for us to make sure this is a scoreboard in a sports term. This is a report card in a school term. It's important for us to make sure we know how we are doing, but it's one test on one day, and we get the results, and we can't do anything about it after that. So it doesn't also define the good work that we're doing. I'll show you specifically about Ames Web here in a second. What we are trying to do is implement assessments and idea and things that are growth that we can use diagnostic instead of summative. How can we give an assessment that identifies where we have needs for growth and immediately change how we're intervening with students or immediately know the results? So we use MAP, growth assessments in grades 2 through 8 in math and reading, and with students with disabilities in grades 9 through 12. Oops. And then we use Ames Web at Bowman and Donovan to track primary literacy skills. This is only, last year was our 2nd year for Bowman and our 1st year for Donovan. We've got some pretty good data on that we'll show. And so this is something I think Mark this is what you get out of MAP. And if you look across the bottom, this is achievement, student achievement from low to high. right? Along the y-axis, the vertical axis, this is growth. I think it's important for him to, like what we talked about. We were achieving as a 4-star, right? Our progress and growth was a 2-star. It's important to know when you look at state report card data and even MAP data, you can have students that are achieving but not growing because they're not being stretched. And you can have students that grow but don't achieve. So for example, this kid right here, this little plus sign, they've grown 65 percentile since in their MAP scores. They're still performing at the 20% achievement level. This guy out here, right? He's above 90 achievement level, but not growing a whole lot. So it's possible to grow but not achieve. It's possible to achieve but not grow. We want to get kids up here, right? We want to get kids up here. This is a data point that we can talk to staff members about and say, how do we get more kids in this category in your classroom? Growing and achieving. I don't want to spend too much time on this because, man, there's a lot of colors going on here, but this is the kindergarten last year. You'll see in the fall, we had a lot of kids at high risk, the red triangle on the far left. Something that we've talked about, we've made the change for this year, and I'll point it to you in a second. Required by Ohio law, we have to administer this in the first 20 days of school to a kindergartner to assess whether they can read or not. Right? Let's all take a moment to, that's how our early literacy scores for kindergartners are determined. So we had a really large red triangle. Historically, we've given this in like the first week or two of school, or sometimes even before school started as a readiness test to see where they were.
Yep.
And we've talked about it. If this is going to be used as an evaluation tool, why don't we use most of that first 20 days of school? Get them in school, get them into a routine, teach them a little bit of something about reading. So we just this year started testing these students. It doesn't take long. We're testing them at the end of that window. Like they started in some of those classes on day 18 of the 20-day window. And what we're seeing is much smaller red and much bigger green. I'll show that to you in a second. But even if you look at last year, we want to move kids out of the red and into the green. Our kindergarten students, our teachers worked with kids and moved them out of the red and into the green. That's last year's data and growth. That doesn't reflect all the time in a test score on the report card. First grade. Did we actually have this many kids that couldn't read in first grade? No, because if you look back the year before that, right? One of the things we brought up last year, I think, Mike, you brought it up, is how much of that is like summer slide, right? Or it's real. In first through third grade, we have the ability to test them before September 30th. It's not even the first 20 days of school. We have until September 30th to test those kids in this test for the state report card data. We're moving it back as far as possible, and today was the first day that we started testing Ames Web data for first through third graders, and our hope is we're going to see a much smaller red triangle that clearly indicates can they read or not, instead of did they read over the summer? Did they lose some of their reading progress they made last year? Reading summer slide is a big deal. So that's one way that we think we can, just by simply testing at a different time, impact those early literacy scores, moving it later back in the window. All across the board, our teachers are moving kids from off track to on track across the board. I mean, we're doing a really good job. This is what I want to show you. This is the difference between last year on what day we gave the test and this year. This was data as of this afternoon. 47% red or 47% green this year. Last year on our first test, we only had 26% of our kids in the green. Our yellow's pretty much the same, but our red students, last year, 53% of our kids started kindergarten not on track. This year, to date, only 32% of our kids are not on track.
Do you anticipate smaller change between the red now and the end of the year? Because
Probably on the end of the year, but my hope is that we start testing later in the window, that next year when these kids are first graders, we have some kids who, this is a better understanding right now of the kids who really probably are struggling with early language acquisition, right? Not just who didn't read all summer long or look at a book, right? So there's something to be said here. We're going to try to get smarter about when we do those things.
are we near the end of the testing zone at the end of the school year, or are we?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for state reporting what we do on those other windows. The state reporting only matters what you do in this first window.
Okay.
They compared this test, because this is the test we've chosen. It's on the state-approved list. They compared this test result when we report it from the fall reports. The third grade reading test at the end on spring, which is the Ohio State test, that's also one of the scores. So that's report card. Any other questions on report card? I know you guys had some questions in emails. Did I cover what you wanted to see?
Did a nice job with that, thanks.
Thanks. If anybody has specific questions or if there's any input you want to, anything you want to say about the report card, it's out there for people to see. I know you've had some questions. I'll pause there for a second.
Are we continue to work, on communicating these results so that we can interpret them for people so that they just don't see a star and realize what half a star difference
Yeah.
makes and
I mean, I
because a lot
hope,
of times when you look at just the stars, you're kind of surprised. But
absolutely.
when you get this information, it starts making more sense and.
My goal was to be able to communicate out somehow from the district, just what does it look like? Maybe it's just this portion of the video tonight and they can click and listen. Maybe it's something, I don't know the best way to do it because, in order to describe all of this is going to be a fairly lengthy process. People told me my email last week was too long, so I don't know how they would handle this, right? So, we're going to work on that, Jennifer. I think that's
Okay.
something that's important for us to do and to say. And I'll answer anybody's questions. If they want to call me and set up a time to meet.
And the
we'll-
analysis is good, the fact that you're really drilling down to find out where we can
Yep.
make the biggest gains and help the most students.
My plan is we have an actual planning meeting tomorrow with our central office administrators. We're getting together, all of us, actually off-site tomorrow for a little bit of time to look at. We're going to spend some time looking at this and identify what do we need to do? What's the things that we can do to improve student performance on these things? What are some things, whether it's staffing, whether it's training, curriculum? I sent all of you an email this afternoon. I would encourage you to read that email that I sent this afternoon forward from Mr. Grayler that talks about, the staffing that was in place 15 years ago when we were performing at our best as a district. That was teacher support, that was curriculum support, looking at student data, polling kids. They had a very robust curriculum department for that purpose. I think that we're seeing in year one some of the benefits of having the 3 new coaches. My feedback from staff I'm receiving on that has been extremely positive, and it's going to take time though, and it's probably not just the 3 of them. There may be some other things that we have to fill in some gaps on where we're doing. The other part of it is like we haven't purchased as a district in a long time, like material adoptions and making sure that we have the best curriculum that we need to have for things. We haven't done district-wide textbook adoptions in a long time. When did that stop? When we got into financial crisis as a district. We slashed our curriculum department and we stopped spending on adoptions. And so right now it's like, oh, this book no longer can be used because it's fallen apart or it doesn't have updated information, and we do spots, right? We're doing things in spots instead of saying, what are we going to do for reading across the board? What are we going to do for math across the board? So some of those things I plan on bringing back. One of the questions was, what are we going to do? How are we going to respond to this? I'm working with our team to come up with that.
I was teaching during that period of 15 years ago when our scores were really good. And I think a lot of it was due to all the support staff that we had for the teachers. I know I felt personally that I gained my skills a lot during that time for extra support. And I think we need to make sure that our teachers have that.
I think that we've started to do that in some ways and get back to that, and we're seeing some benefits. So how do we evaluate that and see what needs we have? So the next two items on the list are informational. You may hear about them. I don't believe that this should not be something that's seen as controversial or going to be problematic, but they're required by law trainings, and I think they're really good, and we have some really good resources to do this. So Save Students Act is a requirement of House Bill 123, and we're required now annually to provide instruction to students around anonymous reporting systems, threat assessment teams, emergency management plans, and staff training. And so what are we required to do? We're required to do 1 hour of training on social isolation using an evidence-based program for every student in grades 6 through 12. We're required to do 1 hour training on safety training and violence prevention from an evidence-based program in 6 through 12, and 1 hour training in suicide awareness and prevention using an evidence-based program for every student in grades 6 through 12. That has to be provided in school every year, annually. So this is something that we have to find a plan for implementation this year. We've looked at a lot of different resources. By we, I mean the curriculum department and our special services, student services department, looking at what other schools are using around us. There's a list of evidence-based programs. And so as a district, we plan to do 3 lessons for everyone in grades 6 through 12 from the Sandy Hook Promise. There's a curriculum associated with it. I can send this to all of you. These are actual hyperlinks. We are not going to click on them in this meeting. This is what we plan to use. Start with hello. It's a video that they watch. There's an activity guide. There are some follow-up questions for 11th and 12th graders and 6th through 10th graders. Say something is a module, a video, an activity guide, and a follow-up. Say something, prevent suicide, video, activity guide, follow-up. Those are the actual materials that account for an hour in those areas. So our plan is to do it in like our homeroom or our warrior time where they have everybody together in those times. And there's a schedule that will be implemented across the district. So again, it's a requirement. It's a school safety issue and talks about like see something, say something, right? And looking at some of those different things. So Save Students Act is something that will be implemented this year. It is my plan to communicate that with parents directly. We'll give them access to see this material and to see what this may be. So any questions or thoughts on that? Okay. The other one is Aaron's Law. Aaron's Law came about as of Senate Bill 288. It was actually previously or originally introduced by Scott Lips, representative from here in Warren County. This is a requirement to educate all students in kindergarten through 12th grade and a prescribed curriculum for health education requiring sexual abuse prevention, child sexual abuse prevention, dating violence prevention, and sexual violence prevention. The law includes requirements for student instruction, parent and legal guardian notification, and training for school personnel. So it's 3 parts of the law. The first part of this is the all staff training. All staff in the district must be trained by the county prosecutor. So David Fornshell himself will have to come and train everybody in Warren County, or a law enforcement official who has experience investigating cases involving sexual abuse and sexual violence of children. Child Advocacy Center, which is an agency here in Warren County, they have a teacher PD program called Stewards of Children. It does not meet the requirement because it's not been approved yet by the county prosecutor's office. And so we are looking as a district on our staff training portion of this, Public School Works, which we use for a lot of our trainings. They're working to come up with something that prosecutors will endorse. That training would be provided by a lot of folks even out of Columbus who have had experience investigating child sexual abuse and sexual violence. And our hope is that we can provide this to our staff through Public School Works videos. That way we have testing and signed off on the end. But if not, we're working with Prosecutor Fornshell. We've all met with him in the county to see how that will be working out. So that's the staff training portion of it. That's a requirement for this year. Staff will have to go through the requirement this year and annually. That's in addition to other reporting that we already have to do and training we already have to do on sexual harassment and on mandatory reporting. This is in addition to. So the next part of this is K-6, child sexual abuse prevention, beginning this school year, which we were informed of this in this spring, summer timeline. This is new to us. We have the full year to do it, kindergarten through sixth grade, and it has to be provided. We'll talk about annually. It includes information on available counseling and resources for children who are sexually abused or have been sexually abused. It was important enough that the law in our meeting with the Warren County folks, this cannot be provided or connected in any way to an individual entity or organization that provides, promotes, counsels, or makes referrals for abortion or abortion-related services. And so that's something that they specifically called out in the law. Child sexual abuse prevention is to occur annually. If we don't offer health as one of our electives, which we could offer this through our health class, then we have to come, it has to be provided in some other way, some other subject. We have chosen to partner with the Child Advocacy Center of Warren County. Those of you, was previously run by Amy Fornshell. There's a new director of that now that Amy is moving over to the Mental Health and Recovery Board. They've created and been working on this program called Child Safety Matters. They have all of the trainings, they have all the parent resources, they have everything they would do. They have trained their people, and they claim they can make it in based on their trained staff to every kindergarten through sixth grade classroom in the county based on the people they have in place. And so the majority of us are choosing to use Child Advocacy Center of Warren County. Is a model curriculum. It does not include anything about gender identity. It is about sexual abuse and how to prevent it, how to report it, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. We will make, because we're required by law, we'll make the materials available for parents when we have them to review. And the Child Advocacy Center also hosts parent informational nights as well. Talk about what kinds of things if anybody would want to come to that. So we'll be sharing information about that as we have more. And let me see here. Yep. 7 through 12, dating and sexual violence prevention. This requirement means they have to receive the training once during that timeline, not annually. So this year, we will have to train all 7th through 12th graders in dating and sexual violence prevention. And then going forward, it would be handled in their health classes as a result of their health curriculum. We're also going to be partnering with the Child Advocacy Center of Warren County for that as well. We would make the materials available for parents, and they will have parent informational nights if parents are interested in that. This would include dating, violence, warning signs, characteristics of healthy relationships, things like that. So I know there's been some questions asked about that. There's some concerns about what that may look like. I just want to point out, these are both required by law. We're working with our partners here in Warren County to figure out how to do that most effectively. So anybody have any questions about Aaron's Law? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Severs. Moving on to the board committee reports. We'll start with the Student Achievement Liaison, Mrs. Dalton.
Okay. Right.
Ms. Lane, have a great evening.
Okay, since we're moving into the school year now, there's a little more going on to report on. So the first page is our mission statement, I guess. I don't know if you want to, this is what we're going to be focusing on this year.
Yeah, so last year, working through our MTSS and PBIS teams as a district, These 3 words were chosen. I'm actually going to be sending out a newsletter in the next day or two that looks at sort of an overview of this reflective, respectful, and responsible community, and really highlighting that, some stories around why that's important. And then we'll begin to educate kids with classroom lessons around what does it mean to be reflective, classroom lessons around what does it mean to be respectful and responsible. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it works.
And I think there's an example on the wall over there in this boardroom. So
Yeah.
does that mean that those will be posted at some of the schools
So
also?
our buildings all have these everywhere. If you walk into a building, it's, what does it mean to be reflective? And it gives some bullet points for reflective. What does it mean to be respectful? If you go to a bathroom in a district, outside the bathroom, it talks about how do you reflective in your bathroom usage, how you're responsible, and how you're respectful. The reflective question is, what did I come here for? Right? Reflective is like, begin with the end in mind, know what your goal is, know what your plan is. If you're in there for something other than what you came there for, you're probably wrong, right? How do you be respectful in bathrooms? How are you responsible in bathrooms? Recess, cafeteria, hallway, classrooms, gym. They have different sets of expectations for them developed by the staff.
That's a great thing because there's meaning behind it, not just this, board that we're putting up and kind of
It's
say
gonna
every
be
now and
taught
then.
and
Yes,
reinforced.
So that's great. Okay, good. And moving on to Bowman and what's going on there. Going along with the mission of the district, they're building relationships with students with rules, consequences, rewards, and relationships. So it kind of folds into all of this. They have high expectations through loving limits. And the instructional coaches are working with classrooms to increase students' cognitive engagement by setting routines and expectations. And down at the bottom picture are the students getting safety training on the buses. We have 83 buses that travel 1 million miles per year. So we'll start them out and teach them all the
It's a lot, by the way. That's a lot.
safety issues on buses, so. And did you see the picture on top?
I
with-
did. I was
Yes.
trying to get away from me hitting
Mr.
kids with
Receivers
noodles.
in
Didn't
gym
want that to be
class.
pointed out. So
So
there
that's
was a
great.
board member who
That
maybe
is
sent me
great to
this
get out
photo
there.
and said, I'm not
Yes.
sure how this is respectful or responsible to,
But it's great to get out there in
to
the
hit kids with
classroom
pool
and,
noodles.
and
It was a great
work with
day.
kids.
I just happened to be in the building that day on my Wednesday walkabouts and kind of seeing the building. And that was a game I played with them at Field Day back in the spring. And so they were almost done. She let them have one more round with me. And they didn't follow the rules. I think I got hit a lot, and none of them got hit by me, apparently. So, yeah.
Okay. At Donovan, their science classes made solar s'mores using scientific methods. So it's a group project. And then they worked as a team to conduct experiments and analyze it and then write reports with results and the outcomes. So that was a team effort. And students earned feathers for community building behavior. And they are in the process of identifying levels of student support needed within the classroom from probably the MAP programs
Yep.
that show the results. So that will be working with curriculum. And at Berry, let's see what's going on at Berry. Okay, here it is. Okay. Berry, the motto is CARE, which is consistency, second chances, responsibility, and encouragement, which they will work with all the classrooms and the parents, students, and teachers will be involved with. There are programs right now that's out there in collaboration with the Talbot House for students that are in the possession of vapes or tobacco, and it's an educational process for them with the permission of the parents, of course, and an explanation letter, and these students are young in 5th and 6th grade, and it's more of an education to understand what these devices can do
Yeah.
to them.
I think it's important to point out to the board, to the people who may be listening, our society has a problem with vapes. And I classify we have children as young as 2nd and 3rd grade, 4th grade at Donovan. that kids have tried and utilized vapes. It's an issue at Berry. And so what we're trying to figure out is how can we become preventative instead of, becoming, punitive. And the alternatives program with Talbert House is really in lieu of discipline or in lieu of the full discipline. Well, they take part of this Talbert House program on vape cessation and things like that. It really is a problem, and we're trying to figure out how we can become more towards preventative and start at a younger age. And people are like, oh, we don't need to talk to kids at Donovan about vapes. There are kids in Warren County as early as kindergarten, first grade. When you talk to the folks in Warren County that are doing these programs, there are kids as early as that using vapes, and sometimes vapes with THC in them, as early elementary. And so it's something they have access to more easily, and we all need to be aware of it. And we're trying to be more preventative and proactive instead of just discipline. So,
It looks like a good program.
yep.
And the faculty participated in a seminar on connection seeking, which helps identify students in need and identify barriers that impact their learning techniques and how to approach students. So again, training our teachers to be better at what they do. And now at the junior high school, there's a lot going on. Teachers are communicating with parents through positive behavior reports. They have put out many, which is just fostering a good back and forth communication between parents and teachers. There have been some positive outcomes surrounding the cell phone management guidelines that have been put into place. And it sounds like there's more good things coming out of it with student involvement, student interaction, student engagement.
Yeah, the anecdotal feedback from staff members is our student engagement in the classrooms is through the roof. And just, one of the staff members I talked to this weekend, I asked, how's it going? And she said, if you ever had like a couple minutes at the end of a class to give kids you got 3 minutes before the bell rings, free time, whatever it was, they would all be sitting and staring at their cell phone. She said now they're talking, they're playing, there's games involved. Mr. Brunk sent us a video from a picture and a video from one of the first probably weeks of school. Used to go to the cafeteria, and he's still at the high school. It's pretty quiet in the cafeteria compared to what it was when I was in school because everybody's on their own phones, which was a problem because what they were doing on their phone would stir things up other places. And they sent a video. They play music at the cafeteria now. Kids are much more engaged, and they're having kind of a random weekly dance off, right? Like kids get up and dance, and the whole room's paying attention to what's going on and interacting, cheering, and it's just created they're happy with the environment. We've had some questions. Parents have been fairly supportive in the conversations that we've had with them, but overall, a successful move in changing some cultural issues at the junior high and student engagement with academics. So,
Good. And the last thing is that throughout the Lebanon city schools, the whole district, we are working on our application systems throughout the classroom. So to make sure that all students are being able to get the full lesson. And I think
yeah, we had microphones and
School-wide.
speakers involved in all of our classrooms, but over time had not been implemented and used as much. There's really good research on utilizing the microphones. The high school needed to be updated. We did that update this summer. We'll have to do Bowman's update probably next summer based off the age of the system. But our focus is on access for students, not just students who have hearing disabilities or hearing impairments, but just those that everybody needs a clear voice to hear and to cut out some of the noise in the class. So all that stuff's a focus.
it probably helps those students that sit in the front of the room and those that sit in the back, they'll all get the same
Yep.
level
good.
of instruction. And then I just have some photos from the high school because Alexa did a great job at going through everything that's going on in the high school. So this is just a little overview of the homecoming and classes that are going on in high school.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay. The CAT committee, Mr. McCutcheon.
Well, we did not meet, but for the record, I'm still as mad today as I was at the last meeting over the state school funding formula, and that has not changed. I have had a few people approach me in the public thanking me for the comments and pointing out the difference and disparity in what public schools are getting compared to non-public school students. And they've been asking, how can we get that message out? Because it's like one of the best-kept secrets in the state of Ohio right now, what just happened. So, but that's all I have to report, sir.
Okay. Legislative liaison, Mrs. Cope?
There's a lot of things still in committee right now, but probably one of the things that I thought was most important is the House Primary and Secondary Education Committee amended Senate Bill 49, which is the religious expression days that students are allowed to have. They're allowed to have 3 days that they can use for religious holidays that their religion might observe. It also changes the definition of chronic absenteeism so that they're not including excused absences. That used to be included in that. I know, I couldn't believe that.
What bill was that again?
It is Senate Bill 49. This is substitutions that they're proposing for this bill, should it pass. They're also not going to count excused absences toward habitual truancy or excessive absenteeism for students that have more than 60 hours of excused absences. And then they're going to provide a list that's going to be considered legitimate excuses for absences. So they're going to be changing. I've just personally seen since COVID, absenteeism seems to have spiked. So changing some of the definitions are definitely going to impact education, I would say,
gonna be
across the
higher.
board. That would probably be my personal opinion, but that's not, I'm just giving the update over here.
Yeah. So I think it's important to note that we used to be really, really good at attendance, specifically at our high school. Now, part of that was the attendance incentives that we offered, that kids didn't have to take exams or things like that based off their incentives. COVID happened, and it really was a cultural shift, right? People thought, we told them to stay home if they weren't feeling well. We told them to, there were a lot of, I've been exposed to an illness, I'm going to stay home. And that changes, and so we are going to have to continue to reinforce that it's important to come to school by whatever way possible, right? That you need to be in school in order to get an education. We've made it possible for kids to miss school because a lot of things have shifted to online and Google Classrooms, and they're not missing as much work anymore. But it's important to be there. You can't replace, I believe you can't replace the value of the instructor in the classroom. And so part of our chronic absentee rate, we're still meeting the expectation, but it's higher than what it was prior to COVID, and we need to figure out. So I'm curious to read that bill and see what happens.
I'll be
with that.
interested to see how, if these are all proposed substitutions, and then it also is asking local school boards to provide policies for some of these things. So this is going to be for us in the future too, if these things go through. I think that'll be significant as we're looking at test scores. Kids can't perform well if they're not in school, so absenteeism comes into play. So that was my big update for today.
Thank you.
And Warren County Career Center, Mrs. Larson.
Yes, our next meeting is not till this coming Thursday, so I don't have a whole lot to report, but I would like to remind you that there is a bond issue for the Career Center on the November ballot, and it's to build a new secondary building. We have outgrown our space. This past year, we had 800 applicants. We only had 534 spots, so we turned away over 250 students. Then we would use the current building for adult education. The Ohio Facility Construction Commission will be providing almost 25% of the cost of the construction. And if they want more information, I'd like for you to visit the Warren County Career Center website.
Okay. Item number 6, I need a motion to approve the minutes from the regular meeting on August 21st, 2023.
So moved.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Mrs. Cope?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item number 7, financial, I need a motion to approve items A through L.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Irvin.
Okay.
Ready?
Ready. So this is the same screen we looked at last month. Nothing will change until November when we do the forecast. And you all know everything has changed since May. So just recognize we're in '24 right now, but a lot of this data is outdated. So when we go to update that in November, the numbers will look much closer. So we're 2 months in this 12-month cycle. An interesting look here, if you'll see the gray line there, we started this year at a higher cash balance than we did last year, and what we anticipated this year, anticipated is just based on actuals from last year. But we've pretty much evened out. So if you remember last month, I was talking a little bit about property tax collections. They were a lot higher than we had seen previously. So I think that's probably what's impacting here. You see that in the second month, not as many property tax deposits as we got that first month because they advance us the money. So it kind of evened its way out. It's kind of where we expect to be. Looking specifically at our revenues and our expenses, at this point in the year, we're looking at about 17%, so 2 of 12 months. Our revenues were at 30%. And we talked a little bit last month. The fiscal year-to-date variance was 32.78%, if you recall that. It is down to 2.53%, but not much has changed. So you can see from the timing of the year what we anticipate versus what we get gives you this variance. It's not really indicative of whether the forecast is right. It really matters what time of year this is. So we're back down to 2.53. As you saw, that cash line pretty much even out to what was anticipated. It was because of time of year. On the expense side, we're slightly under budget at 16%. Variance about 5% less. Again, last month we were at almost 14% variance. So we mentioned last time the expenses kind of even out with salaries when we pay our supplementals and our stipends. So at the end of the first quarter, we'll start paying those, and you'll see those numbers even out a little bit. One of the things I did want to mention, this year in our revenues, you're going to see a big difference. We've moved our Medicaid cost reimbursements to a receipt. So last month, we talked a little bit about the negative expenditure, the reduction of expenditure. Medicaid was one of those. It is a large dollar amount. And so you're going to see that come in as a revenue now, as opposed to just being taken off of the expense. So you're going to see both revenues and expenses increase, not because we're receiving more or spending more, but because of the accounting, the change in the accounting. So just wanted you to be aware of that.
I can turn mine around if I want to look at that.
I tried something new tonight, but my computer over here is not. Okay, there you go.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just sit.
So tonight you all will be approving the permanent budget for the district. We start the year on July 1st. That's our fiscal year, July 1 through June 30. And we spend a lot of time building this budget and presenting it to you. I wanted to share with you, this is the calendar. We've started creating a calendar and tried to get it more appropriate to what we are actually doing. So each year we learn a little bit more and we modify this a little bit more. So this is kind of our projection, what we're trying to do. August through October is our planning phase. Not our planning phase for this year. This year is done. This starts our fiscal 25 budget process. So we've already started talking about numbers for next year. We will spend a lot more time talking through personnel changes that we need, operational changes, anticipated forecast numbers. So when we come to November, we can take some of that planning work and actually put numbers to it. How much do we think we're going to get? How much can we spend? Then when we get to December, we are starting to build our actual revenue. So it gives us a few months. When I present to you the tax budget, that's what I'm giving you is here's what we think our actual revenue will be come fiscal year 25. That allows all of our operational teams, our administrators, to really build their proposals as far as operational budgets and capital requests. And then come April, we pull it together into a 10-year capital plan. We ask the student activity groups, get your budgets to us so that when we come into May and June, we can finalize the forecast based on 11 months of data, 10 really, and also give you all a formal budget. What I'd love to do is get us to a place where instead of doing a temporary in June and then a permanent here in September, we just one and done, we give you the permanent as of July 1. It's done. Now that may take a few years, but that would be my goal. We can change those throughout the year. You approve our modifications all the time. But this way it is the departments, the buildings know exactly what has been approved and they know what to expect from an early standpoint moving forward. So this is our goal. Again, it might take a couple of years to actually get there, but we're very close. So taking a look at the budget that we've proposed to you tonight, I just called out some of our larger funds. I didn't take the time to get you small dollar funds, but specifically with our general fund, right now the projected revenue is about 67 million. Our budgeted expenses are 66.5 million, which leaves a surplus of about 400,000. Now, what I think we're going to find is this is actually not accurate to what will happen. So we've already talked about the potential property tax changes. That won't happen for a few years, but also we don't know how the substitute levy revenue is playing out. We hopefully will see some change this year, but we'll wait to find that out. The other piece that I know needs some work is our salaries. Right now, we're doing our best guess as far as here's what happened last year and here's what we think might happen this year. I'd like to get us to a place where we're budgeting down to a person level. This person moved to this department, so I'm going to budget this amount of dollars in that department. That obviously will take some work. So I think we'll see those changes happen this year. Bond retirement fund, we're estimating about $4.5 million to come in, spend about $4.4 million, which would leave about $100,000 in surplus. Capital improvement, this you'll see a very large deficit, and that is because last year we reached out for some debt to fund some projects. So we had a huge surplus last year. We're going to use that this year to actually do the projects. So it's not a true annual deficit as much as we're spending down that debt funding. Our cafeteria fund, we're seeing about 1.6 come in and about 1.6, 1.7 spent. This last year, that was a slightly positive, a slightly surplus. So I think probably that's what we'll see again this year, but we're keeping a close eye on that. We changed those amounts that we charge for school lunches and breakfasts every year. So as this plays out, we may come next year with an increase to those costs, or those fees. And then I put on here your federal grants, so these are your 500 level funds. I just wanted to give you kind of an idea of how much money we're getting in grant money from the federal government. So our general fund is about 67 million. We're getting about 4.4 million in federal grant dollars. So it's a pretty good chunk of change when you talk about the services that we're able to provide. Now, all of these are very specific. They're for specific reasons, a specific population, but that's money that we wouldn't otherwise have without that assistance. So it's looking good. That large surplus there is, most of our federal grants are reimbursement grants. So for instance, our ESSER grant, huge dollar amount, but we have to spend it up front and then we get it. And at the end of this fiscal year, we had spent a large portion of that and we will be receiving it this year. Just wanted to share this with you. Our HR director does an awesome job with what he does. He's really gotten us to where we're hiring early. And this year he had a huge win. And so I just wanted to bring this up and share this with the board. We projected hiring we actually hired 7 new positions in the second half of last year. The total cost for all 7 positions ended up being around $22,000 because of all the work he's doing on the back end with retirements or resignations. When he can hire, he's trying to hire lower cost employees. So if you think about our retirees, they're at the top of the teacher's scale predominantly. When those drop off, you get someone who might still have 10 years experience, but is on the lower end of the scale as opposed to a 20 or 30-year employee who's at the very top. So overall, 7 new positions. This is not going to happen every year. We wish it would, but this was a huge win for us. And just so you have an idea of funding, salaries and benefits makes up about 61% of all of our costs. So when we can achieve something like this is a big deal for us. And just a reminder, in November, we do have a permanent improvement levy on the ballot. It's not new money. It is renewal. It's a 5-year term, just like our current permanent improvement levy. And just wanted to highlight some of the projects that we did last year, that we have budgeted for this year. We have our school lease payments. So we bought those 20 new buses. So we have the lease payment. We've done a lot of parking lot repair, building repairs. We've bought furniture for our classrooms, for our buildings, textbooks, maintenance equipment, musical instruments, cafeteria equipment. A lot of things planned with these funds. We're able to help the education of our student through building repairs, bus transportation. We've had a lot of talk about the old buses that we used to have and just how much that's helped us in getting those 20 new buses. And that's all I had. Any questions on that?
Okay. I will read through the rest of the items we're going to be voting on. So B was monthly reports. Actually, we just did those. C, permanent appropriations. D, amended certificate of estimated resources. E is a fund transfer. Karen, any comment?
Yeah, this one is a couple of, at the junior high level, we have a building fund. They had a couple of programs in their building fund, and they just wanted to segregate those monies. So we just created new ones. Same pot of money, but just pulled it out so they could see how much was for each specific program.
Okay. F is a couple of donations, very much appreciated. G is activity purpose and budget statements. H is approve the revised exempt salary schedule. I is to approve the memorandum of understanding between Lebanon City School Board of District, Board of Education, and the LEA for the supplemental salary schedule.
I wanted to, just real quick, the H, revised exempt salary schedule.
Yep.
The only change on there has to do with the staff members that were had been administrators in the district for a long time, and they had that supplemental, that salary schedule B, where there was some additional benefits. We have worked to incorporate that in the salary schedule document. It's at the bottom there. It kind of talks about it on the second page. So there are no changes to the supplemental salary schedule that you're approving here in terms of salaries for administrators. It's
I
simply,
believe this also has the administrative assistant to the business director.
yeah. Okay, so that does have that
To
change as well.
realign, yeah,
Okay,
with
so
everybody
both
else.
of those things are on there. Because when we changed the business director to the director of business, that changed her classification as well. So,
J is a fund transfer.
Yeah, so this one we see periodically. It's Title II-A money that we get from the state. We push it over to Title I. It's used for the similar things. We just use it out of Title I. So that's all that is.
Okay, K is a then and now.
And this is similar things as you've seen. I'm glad to report there's only one this time.
L is approve the administrator's supervisor benefits exhibit B updates.
that'll become part of the administrative salary schedule as well.
Okay.
That's what I was talking about there.
Any questions or comments on items A through L? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Cope?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item number 8 is a final reading and approval of the policy PO 5136, personal communication devices. I have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Mrs. Cope?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item number 9, other educational consent items. There are 2 of these, so I need a motion to approve items A and B.
So moved.
Second.
A is approval of a few overnight trips. It looks like wrestling, boys and girls wrestling for out of town tournaments.
Yeah, so a lot of those bigger wrestling tournaments require them to go to a Toledo, for example, or Cleveland, to get an invitational, and so they go up, they spend the night the day before. So this is an overnight field trip for that purpose.
And B is to approve the Lebanon City School District employees, non-resident students to attend.
So our contract allows for this, that when a teacher or a staff member, bus driver, cook, custodian lives in a different school district, their children, school-age children can follow them and come to school here.
And that's been
That's a practice for a
years,
long time.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Customary practice.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mrs. Cope?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Motion carried.
10, item 10 is personnel. I need a motion to approve items A through R.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Again, I'll read through these real quick. A is retirements, B resignations, C is full-time employment.
Mike, I want to, real quick, we have one teacher retirement that's announcing already now before the end of the year. So Susie Sanford this is going to be our last school year. Getting it out of the way early in the year here, this retirement, letting us know, which actually does several things for us. A, allows us to find the replacement sooner, and B, allows us to not have to do the full evaluation cycle for her this year since she did it before December. So there's mutually beneficial. But want to wish Susie the best of luck in her retirement at the end of school year.
She started her student teaching with me.
Awesome.
She went to high school with me.
You're old enough to
Well, she
retire.
survived both of you, which is even more impressive.
When I saw her name, I'm like, she can't retire yet.
D is a list of substitute employment. E is a long list of supplementals. I think it's our winter of supplementals, right? Yes. F is a board resolution for non-licensed coaches. G, supplemental volunteer coaches. Again, volunteers are very welcome and we're grateful for those. H, change of status. I is another segment of volunteers. J is a list of Ohio resident educator mentor mentees. K is the payment for those, is that correct?
program coordinators. So there's different, program coordinators are different than the mentors.
Okay. L is the curriculum leads. for the
So
school
we
year.
talked about this a little bit earlier. These folks actually work at so for example, Kelly Shoemaker is a fifth grade teacher. She's doing curriculum leadership work, so she'll be helping gather some data and doing some things and amongst her teachers at that grade level.
Okay. M is the approval of leave of absence and unpaid days. N is long-term certified substitute. O is long-term substitute. P is transportation seasonal workers. Q is approval of midday aid routes. R is the list of stipends. And that's it. Any question? That is a lot of pages. Any questions, comments there? We're always looking for other classmates in the list. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Cope?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Can I point something out real quick?
Absolutely.
The last page of that, you'll see beginning on page 11, item R, it says stipends. And those are all, everybody will notice, those are all music stipends, music staff members in the district. We've been working with our teachers union on how to best apply the supplementals or the stipends that we have for the work that these folks do outside the contract time. So concerts, competitions, things like that. Mr. Dalton worked with them and came up with a system. So this is basically applying what we would have had in supplementals to forms of stipends and spreading it across the board in equitable ways for them. Really changes how we've done music department supplemental contracts and historically, and a chance to do it more equitable across the board. And so I give them a lot of credit in working with that. That's not in addition to the supplemental that they're already receiving. That is what's going to be happening going forward. So if anybody had any questions about, are they doubling up on that or not, that's what that's for.
Okay. Item number 11, other business. I need a motion to approve, motion to grant the superintendent a 3.5% cost of living increase, retroactive to August 1st. Sorry about that.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments here? All right, roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Mrs. Cope?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item number 12, I need a motion to enter into executive session for the consideration, to consider the employment, compensation, and discipline of public employee or official.
So move.
Second.
Thank you. We will not be doing any voting after this. So, welcome to stay, or roll call, please.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mrs. Cope?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you very much.